Should I start talking? Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the crowdfunding um, seminar that I put together, and it's based primarily on the five different crowdfunding, mostly Kickstarter projects that I helped put together. I either ran or I was part of a team in running them. And the one I'm going to focus on tonight is going to be about a World War I card game that is probably the thing that will relate to most of your interests. After all, Origins is a game convention. I've been there for many years giving seminars, and this one is going to be a virtual seminar. So if you have questions, please wait till the end. I'm going to post some links, and I'm also going to explain basically a little bit more of what is involved if you're interested in doing a crowdfunding project and how to develop, or just simply want to develop a product and how to do it. And this includes not only some of the things that I've learned that have been really, really helpful, but it includes, in the case of the card game, 3 critical mistakes that I made specifically during the Kickstarter that I'm going to share with you because you should not make those mistakes. And I'm more than willing to share that with you so that you can see where things went right and where things went badly wrong, pear-shaped as they sometimes say. And I hope that this is going to be informative and helpful. Let's go to the next slide. So who am I? I've been in the industry, the hobby game industry, since 1972. I've done research for videos, for television programs. I've been a game designer, started with my first design in 1972, and I started Conflict Magazine back then, which was similar to Strategy and Tactics with a game in each issue. I've also been a writer and an editor. I published books. I was a publisher and an columnist for Analog Science Fiction Magazine and Isaac Asimov's Science Fiction Magazine on games, and also for a trade magazine called Model Retailer, which morphed into Game News. And so I've been around here for a while, and I have learned a lot of things that, like I said, I'm going to share with you, and that's been my background. You can see one of my awards there for the serious play for a World War I board game that I designed. It had a basically a teacher's guide with it, which is why it got attention. Serious Play is an organization as well as an annual conference for teachers, for instruction, and it involves not only the public and private sector of education, but it includes the military, the State Department's intelligence community, and so forth. Very similar to Connections, which is almost primarily focused on the professional aspects of wargaming. So that's where I get my background and my knowledge, and that's what I want to share with you. If you have heard my name or heard about Streets of Stalingrad, you probably heard about the most famous game I've done that's won several awards. And as I mentioned, Serious Play, I won an award in 2019. So I have done 5 successful Kickstarter crowdfunding campaigns, and that's what I'm going to talk with you about today. Next slide, please. So the first thing you need to do, by the way, I want to say something that I'm going to have I'm going to put up a link where you can download this PowerPoint as PDFs and then go through it and keep it as reference points, because this is what it's all about. It's like an outline on what are the things you have to think about, what do you have to do to basically create a project. Even if you decide you don't want to do it with crowdfunding, if you want to do something for yourself or present it to a company that is a publisher, these are the things that you need to think about. And so the first ones are, who are you doing this for? In other words, are you doing it for a specific age group, like preschool, young adult, basically high school? Is it college? Are you aiming at basically professionals, as I mentioned, with the wargaming community, people who do this for a living? And then the next thing is, what is the purpose of the game? How are you trying to use your instructional or educational information to teach them what? How to become strategists, how to become better field commanders, how to understand what happened in a period of history. One of the things that I'm really very fond of is this concept of edutainment. You can probably see that at the end of the second bullet. Basically, it's a combination of entertaining people, but at the same time presenting educational information that makes it, as Mary Poppins said, a spoonful of medicine helps, or sugar makes the medicine go down. What you're doing is you're using an entertaining format or game in order to get people to pay attention. If it's fun, then they're more likely to remember what you're trying to teach them. Then the format is very, very important, obviously. Are you going to do this digitally? Is it something that'll be for a computer or on a tablet, on a phone, a mobile device? Or is it analog, the old famous paper and pencil counters, die cut counters and a board, or a card game? Is it role-playing? Is it hybrid of digital and actual real board, real counters? Are there plastic pieces? All these things have to be decided, and they're very important because it's not just an expense on creating and getting it manufactured, but there's a lot of design considerations when you decide what is the best way to get randomness. Do you want randomness, or do you want more of a chess-like aspect to the game? In other words, instead of rolling to get your units into a particular area, can they just go there no matter what, and only the enemy can prevent that or slow it down? Or do you want to have randomness? Are they going to use dice? Are you going to use cards? There are a bunch of different ways to do that. And again, these are the decisions you have to make about what your design is and how you want to present it. And then finally, and this is super important, and I will repeat this, protect your intellectual property, your IP. That means that when you do this, even if it's a playtest copy, even if it's just a rough idea, put a C on there, a little C in a circle, or copyright with your name and date. Okay, a trademark is what the title is that you're choosing for your product, but that's a lot trickier. You can't just trademark. My most famous, and I won't name the company that did this, somebody put TM, that's what trademark stands for. They put it after Nazi. They wanted to trademark Nazi, like nobody could use it without paying them for it. That didn't go over. It didn't work, obviously. So you have to use some common sense when you're going to trademark something. Ancient Rome has probably been used many times in many different ways. So you have to come up with a better way to title whatever product you're doing. But the specific way that you have created a game or a book or whatever it is that your manuscript, whatever it is you're creating, you can copyright that. You can protect that without having to register it until later. So as soon as you do it, make sure that you put your copyright on it, your name, your business name, whatever it is, with a date. Okay. Next slide, please. So how important is the look of the game? Well, I mean, the bottom line is that if it looks good, you'll have improved player engagement. It's also attractive, and that means you attract people to look at it. So, if you have a playtest copy that looks more finished than just something you scribbled out on a hex map, and you have paper counters that, again, you did it by hand, that could work. I mean, I'm not saying it won't work, or the cards have to be, they can be written out simply as like, +2, +3, whatever it is you have to do. But the more effort you put into the look of the game from the get-go, and yes, there is an expense with that. If you're not a graphic artist, then you're going to need to get somebody to do this for you, and you'll have to pay them. That's what I do, and it can cost anything from a few $100s to a few $1,000s, but it has always ended up being a really good investment. It is especially important if you're thinking about doing a crowdfunding where you're trying to attract people to support your project. If it looks more finished and not just amateurish, then you're more likely to get people are going to look at it and say, this looks like it's actually going to happen. So they're more likely to back it. Number two, where do you find copyright-free source materials? This is really important. In the World War I card game, I was able to find an enormous library of photographs at the Library of Congress and the National Archives, and there are other locations as well on the internet, and you can download very high resolution photographs. Library of Congress is free, National Archives is free, whatever's in there, American citizens can use. You can put it in your game and it doesn't cost you anything. But in my World War I card game, I also went to sources where you have to pay for it because I didn't have all the images that I needed on the cards or for the cards in the World War I card game. And I ended up paying out a few $100s to get specific images and permission to use those images on the cards in my game. Fortunately, there were not a lot, and out of the 200 cards in the World War I card game, about 40% of them were created, the art was created by Roger McGowan, who is a Hall of Fame graphic artist in the hobby game field. Roger has been a good friend of mine, and he worked together. We partnered basically on this project. But all the rest of the cards, the majority of the 200 cards, we used Library of Congress, National Archives, and in a few cases, about a dozen or so, we paid for the rights to use the photos, which we colorized and put on the cards. And then the third bullet you see here is what game mechanics are best for your game. Well, I mean, pretty obvious. Solitaire, is it one team against another team, or do the umpires or artificial intelligence get involved? Is it two-player, multiplayer? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And again, this goes back to who are you making this for? I can tell you that if you're doing a commercial game, and in my case, a commercial war game, I have to have Solitaire all the time. Too many guys that I know, including myself, you can't always find an opponent to play, especially if it's a very involved game, but you can come up with a Solitaire scenario, even in a large format game, where somebody can play it because that's the best way you can play it, and you'll have it. You can do it whenever you want to. So I really strongly suggest you look at Solitaire if you haven't thought about that. And from now on, I'm going to always have Solitaire, or at least a scenario that can be played Solitaire in the games that I design. And then finally, why are a graphic artist and a game developer and playtester so important? Well, feedback, feedback, feedback. A graphic artist, as I mentioned earlier, that's the look. That's the way that you get people attracted to the game and convince them this is a real game and it's going to come out if we back it, if we support it. And what about a game developer? Well, a game developer basically is the guy, in my case, who takes my genius and then he basically says, Dana, this is not working. I can't understand what you're trying to get across here. So a game developer performs an incredibly important role in developing the game. And he's the go-between between himself, or rather me, and the playtesters. Rather than have me work with the playtesters, because I'm going to explain, well, this is what you do. It's like, no, no, no. Give them the rules. He helps develop the rules. He helps develop the examples of play. You hand that off to the play testers, and they don't ever hear from me. Not that I don't want to talk to them. It's just that I will bias them. I will tell them what I want, and some of them will do what I want. But what we need are blind testers, guys who, if they have to, they can break the game. They can find something in it that will always make one side win over another, which I don't want. And that's why a game developer and playtesters are so important. And you don't want to get playtesters who, everything you're doing is beautiful. I love it. It's like, no, that's not what you need. You need blind testers who don't know you, who have never, well, they probably heard of you, but they don't have any history of working with you, and therefore they're going to be pretty harsh sometimes, and that's okay. You have to bury your ego and let them attack the game, and that makes it better. Okay, let's go to the next one. Thank you, sir. Okay, so now the important thing is in marketing, you have to think about this, is where or to whom will your game be sold? Again, military, government, corporate, schools, and so forth, there are places to find grants that will give you money to develop a game if it fits in with what they want done. So you can work In fact, like I said about Serious Play and their annual conference, there are seminars in Serious Play that are run by people in the government. There was one in particular by the United States Air Force who said, okay, here are the list of things we want people to submit for possible financing. But you know what? If you've got an idea, no matter how crazy it sounds, it's like we want to hear about it. We want, we might find some extra money floating around to help finance that game. Of course, this takes time, and then you have to know how to present and type up, your proposal if it's the military, government, or corporate, and schools and so forth. The easiest, obviously, are hobbyists like me and like yourselves probably at Origins who just want to play a fun game. And that's where you have to, how are you going to reach them? If you're going to sell it to them, this is where crowdfunding really, really helps, because instead of guessing if the game is going to be popular enough and sell enough copies, rather than sink tens of thousands of dollars into your game, the crowdfunders will support it if they believe in it and you did a good job of crowdfunding, which means they're financing it. Now, keep in mind, if they're doing that, you're giving them a good discount, and you're probably giving them extra bonus things that may not come in the standard game. You have to give them an incentive because they're helping you fund and publish your game. And then this is my repeat on how important is the look of the presentation of the game. Well, again, better looking, that equals improved sales and player satisfaction, which means that personally, I invest most of my money in the graphics before it even goes on Kickstarter, because that is what's going to sell it in my mind. That's been my experience. And I really want to emphasize that if you can, and there are people out there, that freelancers that will do this. And in the case of the Waterloo art book that I also put up on my my link for you to go look at, I partnered with an artist, a living artist, who has done Civil War and Napoleonic art. And this book we did on Waterloo has his artwork. It is stunning. It is just beautiful. In that case, I didn't have to pay him directly because we're sharing in, if it works, then we both benefit. If it doesn't work, well, we don't have to publish the book. Fortunately, we do have to publish the book, and that's a different issue, and we'll get into that in the question and answer period. Number third bullet, how do you sell your game? Okay, as I mentioned, you can find grants, you can get a contract to do a game. Those are the ways that I mentioned: military, government, and corporate, and so forth. You can find investors. That there's a lot of problems with investors, but yes, you can absolutely find people who will actually invest in your game idea. Just keep in mind that if they're investing the money, they're going to want to have a big say in the game, how it's going to be sold. Personally, I don't go that route. I have had bad experience that way, but that is definitely a way you can consider. Crowdfunding, I believe in that very strongly. I just happen to favor Kickstarter, but there are other crowdfunding sites out there like Indiegogo and a few others where you can help find people to help give you the money and fund whatever idea you've got, whether it's a book or a game, which I've done both, or if you've got like a gizmo or a gadget, you can always find someone out there to fund it anywhere on the planet, which is really, really interesting. And there's also the way to go with established game publishers or established book publishers. Again, they make most of the money, but if that doesn't bother you and you just want to get your item out there and you want to put a few dollars in your pocket, you can approach an established game publisher or a book publisher to basically publish your creation. And then number 4, there are no guarantees, okay? So even if everything I've talked to you about, you check that box, you've done really due diligence in finding the best way to put it out there, you'll learn a lot, even if it doesn't work. In fact, I have failed at least once with a crowdfunding, a Kickstarter project. It was a disaster. We stopped it. And then relaunched it about a month later after we had fixed the things that everyone was complaining about. So don't assume that just because it doesn't work, you should just stop trying. That's not the case. Listen to the feedback, listen to what people are telling you. And the more of that you can do in advance of launching your crowdfunding or your Kickstarter, the better off you're going to be. Next slide. So here's what I did with the card game. So who are we creating this for? It's for ages 14 and up, which is going to be junior high or middle school up to college and adults. Edutainment, as I said, it is educational, but we didn't emphasize that. This is an entertaining, abstract card game about World War I. It's fun. That's the important thing. But it does stay true to history, and it shows how things worked together, how artillery was benefited by aerial observation, how artillery was basically a game changer for infantry and tanks when they all worked together in combined arms. Force multiplier is what the modern military calls it, and that is shown in the game, how it works. And from the get-go, copyright and trademark, you can see that we've got that. Next slide, please. So when we went to develop it, as I said, we had graphic artists. There were actually 3 graphic artists. One guy did the design of the cards. So you're looking at the frame, you're looking at the way they look, the cards themselves. Another guy did all of the placement of the text and then the images in the middle. And some of those, if you look at the one with the guys with the machine guns and the picklehobs, that's part of Roger McGowan's artwork. And then the other 3 images, that's also a guy with a picklehob standing in the foreground and Roger's tank at the bottom. But the other 3 cards are colorized images, photographs that we found at the Library of Congress. And yes, that is Mata Hari on the far right. So we did a few purchases I mentioned, but all these things that you're looking there, free, or they were from Roger McGowan. He owns that artwork. It has his copyright on it, and Roger benefits from every game sold. We developed the game as a 2-player initially, but there was such a huge demand by people saying, if you do the solo, I will absolutely support this project. So I said, okay, we'll do a solo version of this. Now, that was a big mistake, maybe not long term, but it was a big mistake in the short term, and I'll get into that at the end. We can also do team play with this card game, and there's a teacher's guide that we paid to have it developed. And the teacher's guide basically enables somebody at, like I said, junior high, high school level, and college to use these cards, these games, in with the teacher's guide to teach something about World War I. And yes, it was a 4-year overnight success. These things can take a long time to develop because there's so much play testing and fine tuning, artwork and everything else. I began the project back in 2017 when I first talked with Roger about it toward the last quarter of that year. And he and I said, yeah, you know what, this sounds like a fun project. We should do this. And so the very first card designs were created in 2017, but for a lot of reasons, until this year. Back, actually, I should correct that, 2020, in November of 2020, but it really went into final production and everything in 2021. And in 2017, it was version number 1, and then by the time the project finished, we were up to 5.5, and the final version is 6.0, which is currently at the printer. Next slide, please. So developing it took so long, partly because non-COVID related deaths in my family that really interrupted things. And then the COVID lockdown really put a squeeze on trying to get stuff done. And then some things just simply weren't working quickly as I hoped for in the game. We changed the way that the naval element works, the naval cards. We tried to make them separate, and we were successful with that, but that took extra time. And so I'll get into that a little bit more also on why it took extra time for all of this. Let's go to the next slide. Now, some of the things worked really well, and I thought I was lucky on that. That doesn't always happen, and they only needed a little bit of tweaking. I mentioned the artillery. Artillery was, in fact, this is where artillery came into being a major force, caused most of the casualties and deaths in the war. And you can see on the far right is one of those aviation reconnaissance planes that did twofold. One, it was reconnaissance for capturing photographic information and coming back and then studying what the enemy had, but it also was both enabling the artillery to hit targets better, and some of the airplanes were actually able to use Morse code and tell them you're hitting long, you're hitting short, and adjust their fire, which was a game changer, and like I said, a force multiplier that happened, which previously, if you couldn't see where the artillery was hitting, you really couldn't adjust it, but that changed in World War One, and we were able to show that in the cards. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, the evolution of weapons and tactics needed to be accounted for. As I mentioned, development, I mean, tanks came in and then they improved. There were also, the machine gun was heavy, but it was a big deal. It also was a huge game changer in warfare, but it was too heavy. And so eventually they developed a light machine gun, which basically was a lighter version of the machine gun without a heavy tripod that the men could carry into battle with them and set it up as they advanced. And then some of the cards were historical, simply to help enhance play. We included Lawrence of Arabia, Matahari, as I mentioned. There's a card called Lions Led by Donkeys, which is a very, very famous saying from World War One. And these are the kinds of things that we tried to inject so people would be able to think about these things, but they had to be accounted for in the game, and they had to have effects on the game, which is what I am most proud of, and I'm really happy with the way that it works. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the marketing, as I mentioned, was to hobbyists and to schools. Roger McGowan was a big name. He was a big part of this. Obviously, as a Hall of Fame graphic artist, people know his stuff. They know him. He's done so many game covers for Avalon Hill, SPI, GMT. We did Kickstarter, which funded in 7 days. That's a big deal. And we did that because we were able to publicize that the game was coming. We built up a big email list. Roger and I have a lot of people who are followers, and we let them know in advance that the game was coming on Kickstarter. And because we were able to do that, it was able to fund in only 7 days. We reached our goal of $18,000 very quickly. And we ended up with, after about 30 days, with $26,600 in pledges from 508 backers. There was a follow-up. Kickstarter does collect the addresses and will collect the shipping if you want them to. But I did research and I found a company called Backer Kit, which is a follow-up company that attaches to Kickstarter. They're not part of this. They're a separate company. They had nothing to do with Kickstarter. It's just that they are a third-party company that I use to collect the shipping information from people, and also the shipping costs, which is separate from what we collected in the main Kickstarter. So we not only got shipping fees, but we were able to sell 46 different add-on products. Okay, this included, in some cases, just simply extra dice, another copy of the game, but there were other things as well. I had some mini board games that were designed for Solitaire, some magazines that I used to publish on World War One, and we offered these through Backer Kit, and the total number of people that bought those were just about everybody of the 508 backers that we got in Kickstarter, plus 46 additionally new people that, oh, I missed the Kickstarter. Can I still get the game? Yes. And we gave them the Backer Kit email address, or rather the web address, and they were able to do that. And we raised another $17,000 in shipping fees, plus the add-on orders. Let's go to the next slide, please. Is there a next slide? No, that's it. That's the last slide. Okay, so in summary, I wanted to let you know that there is a link. Unfortunately, we can't make it a live link, but I have a link to a PDF that has been, or actually it's a Word document that has links that are active. You can link to it, that talks about what I was able to do with the Kickstarter in both of my most recent Kickstarter projects, both the game and the Waterloo book. And then also BackerKit has several basic beginner information for people and what they offer. And these are really, really good. And I also am going to post here in just about a couple of minutes a link to a PDF of this crowdfunding PowerPoint program. If you want to keep a copy for yourself, you can again paste that into your browser and download the PDF so that you can use it as a checklist in order to figure out what to do with your crowdfunding campaign, if that's where you want to go. And like I said, I did speak about other ways to fund your project. So I wanted to mention something, and that is the mistakes I made on this game, this World War I card game. And these mistakes are explained in a video. I was interviewed at a recent convention, Consim World Expo, that was held in Tempe at the end of August, early September. And Stuka Joe, who is one of the podcasters, vloggers, he has a video program, great guy. Look up Stuka Joe. He interviews lots of designers and lots of people doing projects. And I have a link in the download, the first download that I have on, that we're going to show here in a minute, that you can listen to that interview. And my link starts at about the 43rd minute of the interview. The first part of the interview talks about my next game for next year, which is the next edition in the Streets of Stalingrad saga. It is not a monster game with 2,000 counters and an 8-foot board. It's not like that at all. It's a smaller game, regimental scale, smaller number of counters that you can play in just a couple of hours and play out the entire Battle of Stalingrad. And that interview also has at the end, as I said, basically what went wrong with my Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign. And this is what went wrong. There are 3 things I did wrong. So when I told you I did this Solitaire game and that it was a good idea, it was from a marketing standpoint, but I'd never done a card game. So there was already that problem. And now I'm going to do, I promised people I was going to do a Solitaire card game that fitted with this game. That took a lot more time than I anticipated, because it just simply didn't. It was a lot more play testing and a lot more, oops, that doesn't work, we have to do something else. That dragged it out, which by itself was, taking a lot longer to get the game produced and published than what I hoped it would happen. But I made another mistake. And the other mistake was stretch goals, which are good. They make, again, marketing wise, it's really good. We've got a lot of people going, ooh, let's put in more money and we'll get these extra stretch goals, which were primarily extra cards. Now, some of those were just simply cards that would work no matter what. Like the main game had French, British, and German infantry cards. Okay, that was the basic game. But people really liked the idea that we could have Americans, Russians, Canadians, Australians. And so one of the stretch goals included some of these extra cards. Those were not a problem. But we also offered cards that really made a difference in the game and did things that were totally different from the cards and the rules that we had established. Those had to be play tested. We had to make sure that they were going to work. You can't put out these and say, oh my God, these cards don't work. That would have been a disaster. So now I've got a Solitaire game that I had to design. I had to have all the playtesting done on these extra stretch goal cards that were unique and different from the main game. But wait, I made a third mistake, and that is we did an expansion with the Kickstarter. I will never, never, never do that again. The expansion was War of the Worlds. Now, Why did we do a science fiction expansion? Well, there's a historical reason to this. H.G. Wells, who is considered one of the fathers of modern science fiction, he was a journalist, he was a columnist, he was a person who went to the Western Front several times, and he wrote about the war and the aspects of the real war. But he also, before the war, had written The Time Machine, other things, as well as War of the Worlds. And it postulated the idea that Martians existed, they came in and attacked the Earth. So we created this expansion where the Martians land in the middle of World War I and start cleaning up everybody. And you have to contend with that. Very clever idea. You know, we really had fun with it. And then we had to design another game just for the expansion. So I had to design a game for the Solitaire. I had to design the ramifications for the cards that did not fit in with the game as it was originally designed, and an expansion. So it's 3 games that had to be designed after the Kickstarter was already funded. You can imagine a lot of people were not happy about this, on the one hand, because it was taking so long, but at the same time, they really wanted it. And I wanted to finish it because I promised it. Don't do this. Don't ever, ever do this. Don't promise Solitaire if you don't already have it. Part of the game. You can do that later. Don't add things that do not fit in easily with the game. For example, if you have 6-sided dice, you could do, for example, as a stretch goal, you could do a custom-made die. For example, one of the spots, like the 1 spot, could be an insignia for one of the sides that are there. For my Streets of Stalingrad, for example, that might be a red star for the Soviet player, and he gets his own dice, and the German gets his black cross. That's easy to do. You don't have to play test that. All you have to do is manufacture it. And then finally, no expansions. Do not ever promise having an expansion to a game as part of the Kickstarter. And so those things held up the design of the game and were basically a disaster. So it could have been a disaster. Fortunately, I have incredibly patient, loyal fans, but I'm never going to do this again because it will just burn out people and they'll just stop supporting my Kickstarters. So learn from my mistakes. Those were 3. If you want to listen to the video interview, it's on the download sheet. Merle, can we put that up for people to download if they want, or we're going to go to that link? Can we put that up for people? And I'm going to go get the download link for the for this PowerPoint, and I'll give that to everybody. And I just found out I can't upload it because it's too big. So my apologies. There it is right there. That's where you go. If you look at that at the top, at the very top of that page, that's on my Lombardy Studios website. At the very tippy top up there, it says what the web page address is. And then it says that's where you click on it down there, where it says Dana Lombardi of Lombardy Studios has run or been a team member on the 5 successful Kickstarter projects. That's where you click on, and you'll get the links to go to Backer Kit and the other thing. There it is. That's the download. That's what you can get. And those links all should work. If not, you can reach me. In fact, let me type in my web address, my personal email address if you want to contact me about any of these things. And I'm putting it in the private chat. And if Merle, you see that, if you can put that up, people can go and talk to me directly. Happy to discuss things and give you more tips. I will not run your not run your crowdfunding for you, but I'm happy to help you and give you feedback. And in fact, Backer Kit will actually evaluate. There it is. There's my email address. Backer Kit will actually do an evaluation of your crowdfunding before you launch it. It's a really good idea if you're interested in going that way. And I'm sorry, I apologize. I can't upload this PowerPoint as a PDF. But if you contact me by email, I might be able to send it to you, but I'll have to send it by a file transfer service such as WeTransfer.com, which is free. It's absolutely free. I'm not charging anything for it, and you don't have to own an account or anything with that. And I can send you this PowerPoint presentation if you want to get it. So that is the presentation. That's what I wanted to present to everybody. And what I would like to do is open this up now to questions and answers. And there was one. No, that's correct. That is absolutely, Benjamin, you're actually correct. Game mechanics. You cannot copyright or have IP rights on game mechanics, but the version you type up, your rules, the way that you have it, you can copyright that, okay? But you can't protect whatever. You can't say, oh, I put in 5 cards and then I'm going to flip them upside down and then you choose that. No, you can't copyright that. You can't protect that. And yes, you can trademark. Absolutely, Benjamin, you're right. Listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. That is absolutely correct. In other words, there are aspects of it. Listen, the best advice I could give you is talk to a lawyer who is a specialist in copyrights and trademarks. If you think you've got that big of a winner, then you should talk to somebody who knows what they're doing about copyrights and trademarks. Just keep in mind that you can't just run around trademarking things like Nazi or, Hope. I mean, you just can't do things like that. I think that, Merle, you had a question for me that you wanted to put up there. Can we do that so I can answer that part of the question? Because right now things are really kind of crazy out there. The Waterloo book is an art book. It's a big, giant, glossy coffee table book, and we printed it in China because it was a lot less expensive to do so, printing it in China rather than in Canada or the United States or someplace else. However, a lot of things have happened that have just totally messed up the current global supply network. And it also has messed up the production and the costs in China. Even though they're still cheaper, there's 2 things now that are happening. China is no longer as inexpensive. It used to be incredibly inexpensive to have something manufactured in China compared to the United States. I'm not doing that. All the World War I card game that I told you about is produced in the United States, and it's not for patriotic reasons, even though, I like supporting American businesses. It's because it wasn't that difference in price, and this is the other thing that's happening. It is so expensive and getting even more so to ship things in a container from China halfway around the world to land in the United States that it makes it now very affordable, at least more affordable, to have something published, printed in the United States. And so when you are considering doing something like a game, board game, in paper, even with the boxes, even with dice and all the other stuff, you should seriously think about getting a quote from a printer or a print broker. In my case, I use a print broker because he finds the best printing for the best projects and the lowest price from, like I just mentioned, Canada, China, South Korea. He's even done it with some of the printers that are offshore in the Middle East. In other words, he finds whatever is going to work. China may still be the cheapest on these coffee table books because these leather-bound, handmade books still are cheaper done there than in the United States. But just doing a regular game off of a printing press and the die-cut counters and things like that, that kind of game, you can probably produce it in the United States. Well, even if it's a little bit cheaper to produce it in China, it's going to add up big time if you're trying to ship it to the United States on a container ship. Because if you're flying it from China to the United States, I can guarantee it will not be cheaper than publishing in the United States or Canada and having that driven down to wherever you are in the United States or Canada on a truck. So those expenses have just skyrocketed, as well as the fact that it's taking months to get it. Now, hopefully, all the supply problems of the log jam I've got, basically a couple of hundred container ships are sitting off the coast of the west coast of the United States and the east coast of the United States, waiting to get into port. This Waterloo art book, for example, we delivered it to the printer back in May in China. We'll be lucky if we get these books in my warehouse in Oakland, California, if we receive that by the end of this year. And it's very possible, because of the tariffs and the customs and the log jam in the port receiving, getting the containers off the ship, getting the containers unloaded, getting the container projects onto the freight trucks, and having it delivered to my warehouse. That might even go. I don't want to tell people this as absolutely, but I'm really worried that they may not see this book until next year. It's that bad of a backup. Will it be that way in the future? I don't know, but the only way to avoid that completely is to basically manufacture a board game in Canada or the United States. At the very least, you won't have that backup. You won't have tariffs. You won't have customs. And so I'm looking at doing that with these board games from now on. But handmade coffee table books, I may be stuck with China for a long time unless I can find another country that can do that offshore as cheaply. Do we have any other questions, or do we have an area? Let me look under comments here and see if there are questions. Oh my goodness, I missed a whole bunch of stuff. So Benjamin, do we have Kickstarter link for this game? Yes, all the links for both the Kickstarters of the card game and the Kickstarter of the Waterloo book, those links on the Kickstarter, and the links to Backer Kit, where everything is being sold now, along with all the add-on items. Those links are in that link. If you go to download the page that has all the links on my website, the LombardyStudios.com website that we showed earlier. If you missed that, contact me at dana.lombardy@gmail.com, right at the top there, dana.lombardy@gmail. I will send you these links, okay? What else do we have here? Many games simply do not make that much money to be worth it. That is absolutely true. Like I said, there's no guarantee. I've just been very, very fortunate. And really, the initial sales are quite true. Sometimes that's all you're going to get. But if you don't care, if you're not trying to make a lot of money or live off of it, but just get the game published, Kickstarter or crowdfunding is a great way to get it done. What do we have here? The competent man. Once people realize which one is the original and which is the copy, why buy a copy for the same price as the original? Do you mean, Benjamin, are you asking about a copy of the game? Because the game will be more expensive. In other words, the people who get it cheapest are the Kickstarter, okay? That's right. You can't. That's right. You can't. The Kickstarters are both finished. Once the Kickstarter's over, it's over. You can't get those pledge levels anymore. You can't get those items. However, on Backer Kit, you can get those items separately, and you can also get them. There are more add-on items in the Backer Kit. Okay. Kickstarter has closed. That's correct. Is NSDMG involved in Kickstarter? I have no idea. You're going to have to ask the NSDM guys. There's a pre-order button there. That's right. Yes, that's correct. There is still a pre-order button. You can do that. The graphics are one area. Oh, absolutely. IP protection you can do in graphics. They cannot just rip you off and use your graphics, okay? They can go to the Library of Congress. They can get the same photographs, but the way that we took those photographs, colorized them, and used them. In fact, some of them have also been altered. They've not only been colorized, they've been altered. And those alterations are unique to our design. Therefore, we can copyright the way we use that copyright-free original photograph. Okay. There's your answer on NSDM. Let's see what else we have. Well, What was the total cost to develop the game and bring it to market? Okay. That's an excellent question, Benjamin. This card game was pretty outrageous. As I mentioned to you, it went up to level 6.0 in the rules. Most of that was fortunately in the rules changes, but we went through at least 3 major changes in the card designs and the text on the cards. And so we had to print some sample cards in order to send those out to the playtesters. That's the best way to playtest the game. And also the more expensive part of that was getting the graphic artist that I hired to upgrade the cards. If we made changes on the text in the cards, well, he fixed it, and then we had that basically that level of addition of the cards. We took those to a print-on-demand printer, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's the background to it. What's the bottom line? I would estimate that we spent $5,000 to $6,000 just to get this game to the level where it is being published and printed in the final design you're going to see. And then the product that we had to raise about $16,000 to print the boxes, buy the dice. We had some die cutting that was done of the pieces inside the game. It did have some cardboard counters, and we also had a bunch of different sheets of including a playmat, 2 playmats, rules, the expansion, the extra cards. The cards were not cheap. There were 200 of them. I'll never do a card game with that many cards again. So it was pretty expensive, $16,000 to print all those components. And that doesn't include the fact that I'm going to have to pay some people to sit here, feed them pizza and Coke or whatever soda they want. And we assemble the games. I've got a shrink wrap machine, and we're going to send that out. The money we collected on backer kit, $17,000, about 2/3 of that was just the shipping fees that are going to be spent. And so we had to raise that also. So let's go through this. $6,000 worth of development of the game, mostly graphics, $16,000 for manufacturing, which included dice, included the cards, included the boxes and so forth. And then another, say, $10,000 or so in shipping costs that we'll have to pay the post office to send the games out, and also that includes the cartons that the games go into in order to ship them. And what is that total? It's like $26,000, $32,000 of the, what do we got here, 35,000. So we didn't make that much money in profit, and you have to be prepared for that. My big mistake here was making too many things to add onto the game. It would have been cheaper the other way, but then we might not have raised as much money as we did. So that's what you have to weigh. How many things do you promise, and then how many things do you give to them as stretch goals and freebies to encourage people to give you the money. So the card game, 200 cards, it's got a box. If you don't have a box, that's cheaper. If you don't use dice, that's cheaper. I mean, you can do that, but then it's tough to ask people to give you as much money. We asked $39 for the game. The early bird people got it for $35, but still, it's some people don't want to pay that much for a game. You can also add plastic miniatures, and people have done that. That's really expensive, and there are people willing to pay $80, $100 for a game if it has all these little cool playing pieces and miniatures in them. So it's one of those things I said, when you're sitting down figuring out, what are you going to put in the box? Is there going to be a box? Is this going to be just digital? If you're going to just give them a download, a digital download, and it's a game that they can play on their phone or something, well, you don't have to worry about a lot of this, but there's a lot of development costs. And I don't know what that might be, but you could be talking about tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how complicated it is to program this information. Are there any other questions at this point? I'd be happy to answer. And like I said, put up my dana.lombardy@gmail.com and let me know if you are interested in getting some more information. I'll be happy to correspond with you. Thank you so much for listening. Happy to be here.